Welcome to Board Game Binge, the place where we bring you bite-sized, bingeable board game content from across the industry. I'm your host, James Staley.
And I'm your producer, Mike Bruner.
And together, we are celebrating our 100th episode. Feel free to comment if you're joining us live, and we'll answer as many questions as we can over the next half hour in a bit. Mike, it is awesome to chat with you, my friend. I cannot believe 100 episodes already. It's a blur.
Yeah, I can't believe, it doesn't seem like it was a year ago that I jumped on board and got you a couple guests, and then
we just kind of cobbled this thing together a year ago. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's. I was thinking back to the timelines. I believe we were talking just before we went on air. I'll get the exact time because now this is killing me. Now I don't have the exact date. I think it was in May. Was it? Or it might even been March. Now I'm thinking about it. Was it March?
It might have been. I think it was towards the end of May because the first guest I got you was June 7th, and I think that was about episode 3.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay. So it was near the end of May. So we're just over a year, 100 episodes.
Happy anniversary.
Yeah, happy anniversary, man. This is awesome. It's so exciting. I love it. For people listening, if you're joining us live, send us your well wishes, send us your chats. We'll do our best to answer whatever we can while we're going through this. Mike and I are just going to have a nice little chat and reflect on this past year. I thought we'd start off by maybe even just talking about who we are for people to kind of join this podcast midway through that haven't been here since the beginning. Let's talk a little bit about maybe who we are. Mike, can you tell us just quickly kind of, who you are, your background, kind of what your day job is, and then how that kind of relates to what you're doing in the board game industry?
Sure. Yeah, so I'm Mike Bruner. I met James probably 3 years ago.
Yeah.
I don't know that we've ever met in person, but
never.
He
Soon.
was a backer on my someday. He was one of my backers on my Queen Bee campaign. And that's how our relationship started. I grew up in Washington State, went to college in Idaho, and then took my first job in Oregon, and now I live in Utah. So I've kind of bounced around all over the West Coast in the U.S. And didn't get into board game design until probably 4 years ago now, when I started designing Queen Bee. I launched a campaign, and it didn't fund because I did everything wrong. And then I kind of became a student of game design, crowd developing, and then I launched a second campaign, and it went much better. Was able to fund it, was able to fulfill it, mostly without hiccups during that second time.
The second time's a charm. And you're an accountant, right? Is that what you do as a day job?
Yeah, so I'm a CPA, which is a certification they give to you to officially show that you're a nerd. So I went above and beyond. So yeah, I'm a CPA down in the US. I work with small businesses for the most part with their tax issues. I help them with everything from setup to when they get bought out and the taxes all along the way. And that's kind of what I do. So
it's fair to say that you're a tough guy to reach maybe in the first quarter of the year, I guess, is it?
You would know.
All right, so my background really quickly, James Staley. I'm the owner of Tin Robot Games, and I started my journey in the board game industry relatively around the same time as Mike. But 3 years ago was kind of my first Kickstarter campaign. That's when we had connected, as he said, on Queen Bee. My day job is I am a sales and marketing in the supplement industry. So we consult, small, medium-sized businesses that are trying to get into the health industry here in Canada. And in the evenings, I play board games, and I love the board game industry. And it's something that I've been passionate about for my entire life, but started game design actually almost, about 25 years ago. Shelved it. Didn't think that those games would go anywhere because it was all dominated by, 3 players, and it was Monopoly and Risk and everything at the time. And lo and behold, when the whole Kickstarter thing happened and helped the indie industry grow and flourish, that's when I jumped back in and got my feet wet. Like Mike, had absolutely no idea what I was doing, and part of creating this podcast, quite frankly, as Mike and I had talked over the past few years, was finding a way to talk to other, either game designers, publishers, people in the industry who knew a lot more than we did, right? And the idea was that, hey, if we're having these conversations with these people anyways, wouldn't it be cool to record them and then maybe other people can benefit from them as well? So selfishly, when we have these interviews and I'm asking questions, I know that audience members are benefiting from the answers, but I'm selfishly benefiting from the answers myself. Often most of these questions are just because I'm curious or I don't know and I want to get that person's perspective. So it's been kind of cool that that's kind of what we've carved out in this industry. There's lots of developers out there. There's lots of content creators that focus on reviews and things like that. And for us, we didn't want to kind of go down that path of mimicking that. We really wanted to create something that was unique. And that is allowing us to get these nuggets of information, these bite-sized pieces of information that you could sit down and binge all at one time, or take it in little pieces of nuggets while you're maybe brushing your teeth or driving to work or whatever. So that's kind of how we started this whole podcast and really the why behind it.
Yeah. And I've enjoyed being a part of it because I've been able to, I get a lot of questions just from the board game groups on Facebook and Instagram and whatnot. And a lot of times I'll just send them a link to an episode and say, hey, we talk about that in this episode. You'll get more out of it than me trying to regurgitate it for you. So go listen to the podcast. So it's been a great resource as far as that goes.
Yeah, the resource is a good point, because one thing that we started on around, I think it was around episode 50, quite frankly, when we hit that milestone, where I started realizing that our website, which is boardgamebinge.com. So if anytime you want to see a back catalog, of course, you can check it out on our YouTube channel. It's all there as well. But the Board Game Binge website allows you to actually filter, right? So you can go through the past catalog and say you're a designer and you really only care about design and design advice. You can filter on just the interviews that were done on design. Likewise, if it's publishing or if it's distribution, whatever the topic that you want to kind of hone in on, you can do that by filtering. So for us, again, it was out of need that we just had all these interviews, and it took some time going back and recategorizing a lot of them. But now as a resource, I know even myself sometimes if I want to find an interview that we had done, and because I want to go back and remember we were talking about something and I just kind of want to go back and reflect on what that person said, I'll actually even just go on our own website and I'll do the filters to get down to the even sometimes I forget the person's name. I mean, we've had 100 interviews, right? So you can't remember every single person's name off the top of your head. Sometimes you have to kind of think. So doing that categorization and allowing me to filter really helps a lot. So, some people sometimes wonder, like, how do we find our guests? So do you want to kind of take that one, Mike? How do we find our guests for this show?
Sure. I think it's just our own personal networks. Again, going back to the Facebook groups and Instagram accounts, and I follow a lot of people in the board game industry, and just from my own personal experience of running the Queen Bee campaign, I made a lot of relationships along the way, including yourself, that was a backer, but also a game designer yourself. And as we see each other's campaigns and kind of run them at the same time and say, hey, what are you doing for fulfillment? Hey, Brexit, what happened? How do I approach that? Have you learned anything? Because I think as a small publisher, it's impossible to learn everything yourself. Yeah. So if I know you're doing something, I can say, hey, James, do you know anything about fulfillment in Australia?
Yeah.
You can say, yep, I do, or no, I don't. And so just from my own personal network of games I follow, seeing the buzz about games, is kind of how I've found guests. Occasionally we'll have people reach out to us. I think before the podcast went live, you mentioned that we're getting more and more as the podcast has grown. Yeah.
So I think you're being pretty humble, because I think, the reality is I'm just a chimp hurling my feces at people, right? Mike is the one that is finding the guests. You've got the network that is far reaching. Sometimes you'll have a get, you'll say, hey, I was thinking about this person on the podcast. I'm like, I've never even heard that game, and shame on me, because I'm not as tapped into it as you are. And I think that is a huge asset, quite frankly, to the podcast, because there's so many people that we never, ever would have, or I never would have ever had the privilege of talking to if you hadn't brought them to the table. We're now getting to the point where we have people reaching out to us. That's true. So I'd say probably 20% of our interviews now are people just reach out to us saying, hey, saw the podcast, loved it. We got a game coming up, or we've got somebody we want you to profile. Do you mind, scheduling us in? Is there a time slot that lines up with our launch? The answer is almost always yes. We're very accommodating. We're trying to schedule it now on Mondays and Thursdays, right, at 6 p.m. So it's a consistent slot, so people know when to tune in. However, there have been some cases where, whether it be holidays coming or something that causes, or time zones, if you're talking to somebody on the other side of the pond where they're just 6 p.m. our time is like 1 o'clock in the morning in their time, we can make adjustments, and we usually will, but we try to stick to our timelines wherever we can. So that's one thing. The other thing, like I've started doing, Mike, like you have, is I'll see a game that I just find really interesting, and I'll reach out to the person and say, hey, not only do I find your game interesting, I want to chat with you about it, right? So I can think of two most recent examples were Castlescape and Connecting Flights, right? So we had Josh Horsley and Rafa Dawud. Their games, there's just something about them when I saw them online that just caught me, where I'm like, that looks like a really cool game. That's kind of in my style of what I look for. And I reached out to them and said, hey, like, I know you got your Kickstarter coming. Do you want to chat about your game? And what's cool is most people are like, yeah, absolutely, I want to talk about the game. So we've rarely had anybody say they don't want to be on the podcast. I can't really think of any. I've had a couple where just the schedules won't line up, but for the most part, people are pretty excited to talk about their games. What's one thing, Mike, that reflecting back on, if not even the past 100 episodes, even the past 50 episodes, something that really stood out to you? Just to put you on the spot.
Yeah. I just like all the connections that are out there, because I feel like I know a lot of people in the board game industry, and then you'll find a guest and they'll be from my home state, and then I'm like, hey, I thought I knew everybody in Utah, and here comes James from Canada getting Yarrow Studios as a guest, and I've never even heard of them, and they've been a great guest for us and a valuable resource. And so it's just amazing how, again, a small publishing company or one person can only do so much, and it just grows so quickly when you add a second person, a third person, a fourth person. Yeah,
Tanner's great. I mean, that guy has done so much. His campaigns have been massive, right? And I'm glad we're able to connect with him and get him on for a couple episodes. He is a really good resource. He's a good guy to reach out to, and he's well connected as well. I think to kind of continue on, I think the connections is a big one for me. I've started to make a lot of friends, quite frankly, in this industry. And what's really cool to me is, on being a game developer and publisher myself, I am constantly reaching out to these guests. So these people that have been on our podcast, I always make sure I'm staying connected. And usually after the end of the interview, I say, hey, is it okay if we stay connected? Because I'm going to have questions I might want to ask. And everybody's been amazing. There's not been anybody that said, no, don't reach out to me. People usually get back to you very, very quickly. So I'm constantly DMing our different connections that we've made as guests on this podcast. The one thing I thought was really awesome, and I think is a testament to that, is when we did this giveaway, right? We wanted to celebrate the 100th episode. So leading up to the 100th episode, we thought, hey, why don't we give away a few games, leading up to it. So a couple weeks ago, I reached out and I thought I'll just kind of cast my net wide. And I reached out to, I think it was 14 different companies. Within an hour and a half, I had 12 companies say, I'm in. Here's a game. The other two, I'm still, maybe they didn't get my note or whatever, but 12 like I thought I was going to get 3, right? So to have 12 said to me, one is that there's a valued relationship there, right? So they value the relationship that they've built with us as well. And two, I think it speaks to the constant contact that we stay in with each of these people as well, right? So it hasn't been like, hey, thanks for the interview, see you later and enjoy your life. Like we keep reaching out to these people, right? We keep talking to them because there's this communal sharing of ideas. I know Chandler calls it the co-opetition, but it really is an amazing industry how we can all kind of share these ideas together and really try to make the industry better as a whole. And I think, you know, everybody kind of contributing and sharing those ideas helps with that. What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of that. And I also think it's the whole, we'll scratch your back, you scratch ours mentality of, hey, we don't charge for these podcasts. It's free marketing for anybody who wants to be a guest on our show.
Yeah, that's true.
When we're celebrating something and we reach out to these companies, I know, I remember which podcast I was on when I did the Queen Bee campaign, and I remember which reviewers I went out to, and I've seen opportunities. I've collaborated with some of them after the fact and said, hey, let's do a giveaway on your Instagram account. You helped me during my campaign.
Yeah.
Let me help you grow your thing. And I think there's a lot of that in the board game industry, the co-opetition.
Yeah.
We're not always in a position. Sometimes we're in a position where we need help, and other times we're in a position where we can give help. And I love seeing that collaboration for this podcast and just across the industry.
Yeah, I agree. I think, that's something I don't know if people realize. Like, we don't charge people to come on this podcast. Like this is us chatting with people about the board game industry, trying to see under the hood and add to learning ourselves. Certainly gives exposure to people's games. You have some cases where, you know, they don't, I'm sure they don't need our exposure. And there's other cases where we've had people that it does contribute to the exposure of their game, because we're not picky, right? Like, we don't say, oh, we're only going to go with like the big guys, the big players. If it's something we find interesting and we think there's a story there, we're willing to explore it. And for me, this podcast is about the people, and it sounds a little cliche, but it's true, right? It's when you listen to any of our episodes, the first third of our episode is just trying to understand, who is this person? Why did they get into this industry? It's a strange thing to make a board game, right? Like, if you're at a party and you're talking to somebody and you say, you know, what do you do? And they're like, oh, it's my job. Oh yeah. Do you have any hobbies? Yeah, I make board games and I launch them around the world. Like, that's a really weird thing to say for people who are outside the board game industry. So for me, it's a curiosity. Like, okay, I know how I got into it, but how did they get into it, right? And we've talked to engineers. I mean, we had, it might have been Rafa. Yeah, Rafa Dawood. The guy's making wind farms off the coast of the UK, right? Like, he's the engineer on the actual, solar, wind power generators. Like, that's his job. You know, we talked, Josh Horsley's another one I know is most recently, but I mean, he's working on autonomous, driving systems in your car, and, when the lights come up on he does a lot of programming on cars. These are careers that have absolutely nothing to do with board games. So it's kind of cool when you hear somebody like that, find out, well, what led you from this to that, right? And that, for me, it's kind of a cool thing. What's one thing, Mike, that you've wanted to kind of, we've talked a lot kind of after our 50th episode, that you wanted to see more of, that you find that we're able to do? Like, was there anything that you're like, this is something I think that you wanted to see covered coming into these past 50 episodes that we're able to get done?
One thing that I've, and it may not be true, you would know better than I would, but the first 50 episodes talked heavily on like game design, specifically, and live Kickstarters. And I think the last 50 have brought in more content creators like Ellen and Randy Kirby, and some of those other people.
Well, I'll name them all. We've got Our Family Plays Games, The Charity Board Gamer, We Game Together, Quackalope, Alex Radcliffe, Todd Patriquin, Tabletop Animators. Sorry if I missed anybody, but I mean, that, that's getting to almost like 1/6 of our episodes were on content creators. That's actually what I had on my list too. That's cool that you felt the same way. That was something for me that I wanted to get into, is really more the content side, right? And find out, how did those people get into it? And the one thing I was actually surprised but not surprised, is that they're all just trying to figure it out. Right? So when you see a polished video and you see a channel where it's polished, and you're like, wow, this person's like, man, they're just awesome at content creation. These guys just, they know what they're doing. This is just, these guys are the deal. Almost every single one of them, they've got to the point where they can present themselves that way, but they're still trying to figure it out, right? Nobody, at least that we've come across yet, is what I would call an expert at content creation, right? Because things are constantly changing, and they're kind of trying to find their groove. And I think what I like the most about the content creators is the personalities, right? Because that's their hook, right? Our Family Plays Game is a very distinct personality. I can't not smile, when Mick and Starla are talking. They're just awesome. I love them. And then, you look at, Charity Board Gamer, Chris, his hook is very specific on, getting money into charities and playing games with people and talking about charities and so forth. So his personality and a lot of his, a lot of the things he does on a charitable side comes through on his content. Quackalope guys, it's kind of got a weird brand to it. They're quirky guys, and that's cool. It works, right? So that reflects their personality. Amazing videographers, right? So you watch anything they do, it is awesome, right? So I think that for me, that was something that I really thought that we had to make a conscious effort to do, and I think we're able to achieve that. We'll have more coming up. There's a lot of content creators out there. Geek and Pink is actually coming up in another week, which I just lined that one up today too, so I'm excited for that. So we're going to try to hit this from as many different angles as we can. But I think, to your point, it's adding to kind of the overall balance, right? So it's not just about how do Kickstarters work, but it's getting into everything. Look at it from any possible angle you can. You brought Todd in, right? And I remember when you reached out to me, you said, hey, would you want to interview somebody that photographs board games? I was like, hell yeah, I want to interview somebody that photographs board games. Of course I do. That's so awesome. And that's so different from anything else that we've ever done. And then, the more I got to know Todd, and he saved my bacon even on my own campaign. We had our reviewer samples that had to go out. We missed the Chinese New Year kicked in, so we got nothing coming from our plant, and they forgot to put the yellow cubes in the reviewer copies. So I reached out to Todd because we had talked offline that he works for a small run game manufacturer, and it said, hey, is there any way you guys could fly me some cubes? He's like, yeah. 48 hours later, I had the cubes. So I wouldn't have learned about his channel, Victory Point Labs. I love it. But people probably think that we're related, or this guy is paying me or something, because I know I cannot talk enough about Victory Point Labs, but I absolutely love the show. It's just so cool. And I geek out over seeing how these photographs are made and these different tricks and things behind the scenes. So for me, that's been kind of cool to get these things in our podcast that, if you had to ask me a year ago, who are the kind of people you want to interview, or what are the types of things you want to learn? I'd say at least probably a fifth of them are things that have come up along the way that I never even would have imagined if you hadn't have introduced it to us. So I think that's pretty cool.
And something to add to kind of this idea of content creators is we got Todd, who's a photographer. He's a fun guy to talk to, but he loves photography.
Yeah.
And he's found a way to take amazing pictures of games. In the interview with We Game Together, Randy talked about how he's just good at telling people how a game plays.
He's awesome.
How to play a game. And so that's his lane that he's really good at. And so when you're doing a Kickstarter, when you're designing a game, I think during that interview, you even said that he explained the game better than you did, and you designed the game. And so some people are just better at certain things. And so do you want to be involved in charity? We got a guy for that. Do you want an amazing video? We've got a guy for that. Do you need a video of how to play? We've got a guy for that. And we got, great pictures, great, just the main videos. And so it's amazing how even just content creation spans so wide of, well, what do you need?
That's a good point. And I think, I think it's an awesome point. So if somebody's looking to make a game and you want to think, okay, what kind of content can I build out around this property? I would encourage you to check out all these channels because they all have their own hook where they help. Even Alex Radcliffe, that interview was awesome, and he and I talked for probably another 40 minutes after the interview ended off air. Number one, very, very gracious with sharing information. So he personally gave me, said, hey, like the mic, I changed mics. I'm using the mic that he used because I'm like, your voice came through way better than mine did. What mic you're using. He gave me some advice on thumbnails and so forth. So we started changing how we structure things. And it's cool hearing from someone that's, figures some of these things out to be able to kind of lean on them. And he's good at actually talking about mechanics of games and so forth. So when he reviews, he's not necessarily saying, this is a good or bad game. He focuses on this is what this game is about, right? Which I think is pretty cool too, because again, that's his angle and that's his hook, and the fact that he's got a company that sells and trades used games, right? That was an amazing thing that I had no idea about too. So it's kind of neat when you learn the backstory of some of these people and how they're tied in. Has there been any relationships that you've made during this process that you've been able to then leverage on some of your games and things you're working on at all, or? I can think of one for sure because I saw some Queen Bee photos on Instagram.
Yeah. So Todd, I just followed on Instagram, and then I dabbled in photography in high school, and so I tried different things, and none of my pictures turned out as amazing as his. So I was able to hire him to take pictures of Queen Bee, and it's been a lot better. And having nice photos of your game is like having nice photos of your kids.
Yeah.
It's so much better to have quality pictures of all the work that you put in. Yeah, and
I can think of one on my end. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say Seth Hyatt. So he's got Mayday Games. He also does Sleeve Kings. And I was talking to him off air too, and I said, do you ever partner with like companies? Because it's just curiosity. I'm thinking, Sleeves, he probably must like partner with companies. Like I see a lot of companies afterwards, he's selling aftermarket, but to me, it made sense. Is there companies where, why wouldn't they just include the sleeves as part of their game as an add-on? And he's like, absolutely. In fact, we do that deal a lot where, we'll work at a deal and we'll get it to your chain, because all of our stuff is in China. So we'll send over to your Chinese manufacturer. It's going to save your backers on shipping costs of the sleeves, and they're just paying the actual cost of the sleeve. So him and I actually struck a deal to get the Sleeve Kings as an add-on in the Nutty Squirrels game. Nutty Squirrels are the Oakwood Forest. So that was something we added on at the 12th hour, but it added so much more value to people who like sleeves and so forth, who are backers of my game, because now they're not having to pay the shipping cost twice, right? Now the sleeves are literally shipping with their game if they want to order the sleeves, then that way they didn't have to pay the shipping. So for me, that was something that was kind of cool. Patrick O'Callaghan from Space Duck Games, they did the Factory Floor game. Can't wait to get that game. I'm going to get that in September. I actually backed it. After we did that podcast, he did his own version of our logo, of the little caricature we have of the guy eating, the meeples, binging on game pieces. And I loved it so much. I said, can I use this? Can I please use this? And he's like, yeah, go ahead, man. It's yours. So that it became our new logo, right? And then I reached out to him and said, can I actually hire you to help us with the animation? Because we've got the guy doing 2D, binging on the meeples. It'd be cool if we can have everything match, right? So that was something where it was a one-off. We're doing an interview. He throws me a little one-off. Hey, thanks. It's great chatting with you. Here's a little caricature I did. And that then turned into a relationship where he's helping us actually with our IP, right? Around Board Game Binge, which I think is pretty cool. Anybody that hasn't checked it, at the end of this podcast, you're going to see the guy just shoving the game pieces in his mouth from the box, so you'll know what I'm talking about. But I absolutely love it, right? And that was a relationship we're able to build there. The other thing I wanted to talk, I was going to say a little shout out to Nick Smith as well. There's music that is at the beginning of every one of our episodes, and some people might think, well, where'd that music come from? That was actually custom made by Nick Smith. So he wrote that, arranged it, and created specifically for a show. So you only hear that music in affiliation with the show, which is kind of cool. So I just want to give him a shout out as well. What are some of the episodes or some of the themes, Mike, that you would say have maybe not been super exciting, but have been informative or helped you? I can think of at least one.
I think anytime we talk about the after Kickstarter stuff.
Yeah.
So like fulfillment or VAT or worldwide, shipping, those aren't necessarily the most exciting, but those seem to be the ones that get the most questions on board game design groups is, hey, I funded, now what? And
yeah, that's a very good point. I think, I get it, talking about distribution and taxes is as dry as anything, right? It's like, I'm sure you just want to, people use that to fall asleep too, but we try to make it as interesting, as exciting as possible. We do it in bite-sized chunks so that, again, you're not sitting through like a long lecture. But for me, it was important to include those. So we had a good one with Nigel, right? We talked a little bit about VAT tax. The reason this is so important is because there are huge changes happening in the industry right now that literally impact everybody. It impacts publishers, developers, and even backers, right? You've got shipping costs starting to climb. You've got, shipping accessibility becoming tougher, right? So things are not shipping as fast as they've shipped in the past. So these things are kind of impacting the ability for you to get your games on time and the cost to get your games. But on top of that, with Brexit, what happened was they split off from the European Union, and both the European Union and UK decided at that time, now's the time to kind of rejig all of our legislation around online taxation of e-commerce, right? Because everybody's been had a free ride up until this point. Well, because there's so many campaigns that are always going on at any given time, for me, I was concerned because VAT tax is 20% of the retail cost. That's a big, big amount. And it was possible that there was going to be some people that were either A, going to hear from their publishers reaching out for more money saying, hey, by the way, this thing kind of went through after we had closed our campaign and we need your help, need some more money. Or people would be impacted by seeing, average game prices starting to jump and say, well, what gives? How come games are more expensive now than they were before? That's just a card game. Why is it costing this? I paid, 20% less a year ago. Well, there's a reason behind that, right? So we did a couple episodes on that because we wanted for the publishers to understand, if you don't know about this, you need to know about this quick, right? Because this is going to impact you in a very meaningful way. And it could be a difference between you breaking even, or even losing a lot of money. But then also for the backers, right? People who are waiting for their precious games to arrive, something that they've backed, that they've been passionate about, they love it, they're so excited to get it. Well, you're going to be impacted in a pretty big way, and we want to make sure that people knew that as well. So for me, I apologize if some of those episodes were dry, but I'm telling you, they are necessary, right? And if you are somebody who A, is waiting for your game, or B, a publisher, check out those episodes. They are so important, especially on the publishing side. Yeah. Any other thoughts in terms of these different? I just actually realized Board Game Girl Jess. I didn't put her as a content creator. She's kind of technically through Girl Stampede a content creator, so we'll put her in that list as well. Even though Board Game Girl Jess is also a consultant and has done some great work out there as well. But I want to throw that there as well. Where do you want this to go from here, Mike? How do you see this podcast evolving?
I think it's, one of the resources when I launched my Kickstarter campaign was the Jamey Stegmaier's, I totally butchered his name right there, Jamey Stegmaier's book.
Is it Stag or Steg? I never know.
I think it's Stegmaier.
I say both. Sorry, Jamie.
I've heard it both ways. His book about crowdfunding, and that was published, I think, in 2015 or 20... Yeah, let's go with 2015.
Yeah.
And that's a valuable resource, and it still has a lot of relevant information in it. And I still encourage people to read that book before you launch a campaign. But the industry has changed quite a bit since then. And we've now got GameFound as a platform. We now have other online crowdfunding resources, and worldwide shipping has completely changed since that book was published. And so this podcast kind of is a fluid podcast of, hey, let's talk about fulfillment again, because we talked about it last year, but it's changed completely in a year. And so let's talk about that. And just as the industry changes, as things change, it's nice to have current information that we can provide. That's
a great point. I read that book, Jamie's book. It was fantastic. I echo the sentiment on that. For anybody looking to launch a board game, do yourself a favor, get the book, spend the $10 and read it. There's still a lot of launching a game 101 in there, I think, that still stands the test of time. Obviously, there's some things that have changed. I actually even asked him this in the interview. I said, knowing what you know now, is there anything you would do differently or say differently in that book? And, I think his answer at the time was he tries to cover that off in his blogs, right? So if you go to stonemeiergames.com, Jamie runs a regular blog. There is more than just that one guy alone. There is more than enough information in his book and on his website to get you 90% of the way there. And if anybody's launching a game that hasn't checked that out, it's your loss. It really is, because he's just a wealth of knowledge because he's been through it all. Now he's not doing Kickstarters, right? So he goes direct. So I think that's where you get some of the dating that some of the newer movement and things, I think, is starting to change, right? So some of the themes that we had talked about in the past, having preview videos on your page is a must. Having, marketing dollars put behind, Facebook ads, although that might change now again with all the change in Apple's privacy software updates and so forth. But that was pretty consistent, right? That if you're using like a BackerKit or one of these other social media amplification companies that help you with the marketing, that's the difference between, getting into tens of thousands of dollars versus, below that. So I think some of these things we're starting to see, it's cool that we cover them off in this podcast. And I think this podcast hopefully is a resource for some people where they hear that enough. They have enough people that they listen to how they got their game successful and start seeing these things kind of trend through. We had a good interview when I launched the Nutty Squirrels of the Oakwood Forest. Afterwards, the first thing I did as soon as my campaign closed is I did a live video where I talked, while everything was still fresh in my mind. Here's my key learnings we literally just finished the campaign. Here's some of the learnings that I had coming out of this. So I would encourage anybody to reflect back on that. I can't remember if that's even on YouTube. It might just be on Facebook. I'll see if I can find it and put it on our YouTube channel. But it was good because I actually take people through like the reverse bell curve that you get in Kickstarter campaigns, and I talk about the importance of ads, and I start talking about some of the mistakes I made and things I do differently for the next time. So I think these are all good resources that can help people in the future. Some of the questions that some are asking is, why the change in format? So, we started this podcast off, it was entirely Facebook Live videos on our Facebook group, which is now up to 1,500 members. And, thank you to all of you that have joined our private Facebook group, the Board Game Binge. Anybody listening, join. You're amongst friends. We'd love to have you. We did a lot of giveaways and things in that group, but we exclusively did these interviews in that channel. And about, I would say, I guess it was 2 or 3 months ago now, something happened where Facebook either changed their programming, their updates, or something happened with Mac and OBS and so forth. But all of a sudden I couldn't cleanly click a button to publish the episode straight to that Facebook group. I believe it's because it's a private group. There are some workarounds to do that, but it is a lot of work to work around just to get a single stream into that channel. So Mike and I made the decision, right? Do we pivot or do we stay on this course? And the decision we made was that while all of the audio is always published out, so wherever you listen to your favorite audio podcast, whether it be on Apple or Stitcher or Google, anywhere you get your Spotify, anywhere you can get an audio podcast, you get copies of these episodes. They're available pretty much within an hour of us going live. But for the live actual video interview, we decided to move to YouTube Live. So YouTube Live, as well as the Board Game Binge Podcast Facebook page, not the group, but the page, it also goes live there, as well as Twitch. And the reason we made this decision is we want to grow, right? We want to continue to grow. And one of the biggest issues we had that this moment allowed us to reflect upon was that when we would have guests join us, they would say, hey, I got a bunch of people from our company or our Facebook page, wherever, that want to watch this live and participate. Is there a link I can send them? And I'd say, well, you can send them this link, but they have to join the group first before they can see the live, because it's a private group. You can't see the live video unless they're part of the private group. And these conversations were literally happening like 5 minutes, 10 minutes before we're going live, which is not even enough time for Facebook to even approve people as new members. So people would, try to join the group, and they would join and they'd, be let in, but they'd only let them in after the interview was done. So with OBS and the software we use now, it allows us to schedule out the YouTube video link. We can send that link to the people we're interviewing. They can share that amongst their social media profile, and it makes it more accessible for people to be part of our podcast live. So that's the key reason we did that. We realize it's a kick in the pants for people that were used to watching it on the private Facebook group. Our hope is that we can port as many of those people over as possible and become fans and subscribe to us on YouTube. One of the cool things about YouTube is it's a lot more friendly than Facebook, right? So Facebook, if you publish a live video, a week later, if you want to go find that video, it's like, that's going to be your exercise for the afternoon to find that video. I even had somebody that we interviewed say, hey, I was trying to find the video we did 2 weeks ago, I can't find it on Facebook. I had to mine down through to try to find, the episode to give them the link. YouTube's not like that. YouTube, everything's nice and categorized. If you want to see things that we've done in terms of giveaways, they're all categorized together. If you want to see the podcast episodes, you can see those. Like, everything is nice and easy to filter on YouTube. So that's kind of why we did that. And from time to time, we'll just do an impromptu live stream where we're talking about whatever. If it's a game that I've backed where I want to look at it and talk about it, we put it on there, and it's some extra content for people to consume. I think one of my favorite moments, Mike, for me was seeing you do the interviewing. So over 100 episodes, Mike's done one. Mike's hosted one. We're going to change that. We're going to get Mike hosting more. But you did a good job. That's good.
That's a good way to drive down the quality of our podcast.
No, it's good. You're good. How did it feel? How did it feel being on the host side?
It was good. I'm less charismatic than you are, and so you make an excellent host, and I value what you do.
I don't believe that.
I like my role.
You're a charismatic guy. I think it's literally just repetition. So maybe what we'll do is, if people want to hear more from Mike, let us know. We're going to try to encourage him to do some more. We'll get him into some more of these interviews. At least I think in terms of creating some content, it'd be kind of cool. I know that, Mike, you've got some stuff you're working on now behind the scenes, right? In the game. Maybe talk about some of the things you're doing now on the game side.
Yeah, working on...
If you don't mind.
Yeah, no, I can talk about it. I'm working on another game that I'm calling Gadgets right now. We'll change that title eventually, but that's what we're referring to it now. And the closest thing that I would say it's like is kind of like Above and Below, if you're familiar with that game from Red Raven Games, where a lot of the times during your turn, you're given a scenario where you have to make a decision. And you read some of them where, like, you're being chased by this haunt and you have to choose between this sturdy looking rope or this frayed looking rope, and you've got to decide now on which rope do you jump on, and then based on your decision you read what you get for making that choice. And that particular scenario was fun to see all the results, because a lot of people were like, why would I choose the frayed rope? And maybe there's a reason behind that one being a little more worn than the new looking rope. And so there's just the genesis behind this project was, I've got oodles of kids, and whenever they would want to do a late night with dad and play a game, the game that they'd always choose is Above and Below. And as far as setup and gameplay, it's kind of above their level.
Yeah.
And strategically, they wouldn't play it. They would just play it to go to the caverns below and be read these stories. And so I wanted to create something that was a little simpler as far as setup and gameplay, but still provide the opportunity of kind of like a quasi RPG game for kids for adults to play with their kids, or adults to play with other adults, because I've played it with adults and we have a good time of making silly decisions in that. So that's what I'm working on. And Sarah Keel is actually the artist for that game, and she's having fun with the world building. And I've kind of just said, hey, whatever you want to create, let me know. We'll create it. We'll add it into this world. And I think artists like the freedom of that, and other artists, they want specific direction. And she's an artist that I think likes the flexibility to just create and draw and come up with stuff. So it's been fun to work with.
She's super talented too, right? Like, and she's already built up quite the, I'd say, resume, right? Of games that she's worked on, like Bristol 1350, 1350, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah, Bristol 1350, and in all the, I think she's done several titles through Facade Games. So her artwork is awesome, right? Very, very talented family, quite frankly. I think her husband's also an artist as well, nice. Josh. Always love to see the stuff they're doing. On my end, I've got a couple games I'm working on. So the one I talked about in our interview, we've actually pushed that out a year. The dice drafting game we're going to do, purely because, after we interviewed James Freeman, who did the social media for Doomlings, I was talking to him off air and I said, is there any, like, have you thought about game design? Have you worked on any games yourself? And he's like, I've got a couple. I've got one I've was working on for a while, and I did Kickstarter and it didn't really go, and I kind of shelved it. And I said, well, send over. I'd love to take a look at it. And I looked at the game, and right away I could see what it would be, right? What it could become. And so I said, would you be interested in partnering on this game? Maybe I could be the publisher. And yeah, he was excited. He said, yeah, let's do it. So that game is currently scheduled this fall. We started, we got the prototypes and everything going, the stand-in art and so forth. But it's called Hamsters versus Hippos. And you're basically hamsters that have escaped the zoo. You're trying to get out and collect these precious lotus flowers that you saw outside your window, for the years you're sitting in your cage. And as you're running across these lily pads, there's hippos in the water. And you're trying to find as many as you can before your friends do and before somebody gets eaten. So it's a bit of a press your luck game, a tile flipping game, which is kind of cool. And then another game that Adam, my brother and developer with me, that's been working on, he and I work on most games together. This is one that we had made that we're very excited about. It plays so well. It's a card game, and I always swore I would never do another card game just because I'm trying to expand out into more board games and things like that. But it's such a good card game that we're probably going to launch it this fall as well, right after Hamsters versus Hippos. So Hamsters versus Hippos is James Freeman's, and we're just going to help him with the publishing side of it. Our game that we're creating is called Planting Evidence, and it's a card game where you're trying to essentially frame other people for murder, which is a lot of fun. So stay tuned to hear more about that. I'm sure Mike and I will sprinkle in amongst the Board Game Binge YouTube page some of our progression on some of these things. I just want to say thank you so much to everybody that's been part of this journey with us, that have either been there from the beginning or have joined us along the way. I hope that you're finding something in each one of these episodes like we do, and you're walking away with some benefit, and you're getting some enjoyment out of it. And I just want to say thank you so much. Any final words from you, Mike?
No, just echoing your gratitude to our listeners. We wouldn't keep doing this if we didn't have listeners, if we didn't have downloads. True. And we right before we got on this podcast, we looked at the analytics of our podcast, and there's people listening, and that's fun to be creating something in podcasts that people find valuable, because the downloads keep trending upwards, and so more and more people are finding us, which makes me believe we're helping more and more people. And so we appreciate you listening and then sharing it with others and helping us grow this so that we can make the board game hobby a little bit better.
Yeah, I think that to echo that sentiment, it was JT Smith. We've had 2 interviews with him, and they are both in the top 6 of all downloads that we've had. So clearly there's a lot of people out there that do board game design or into making games that enjoy this podcast. So we'll continue to bring as much diverse content as we possibly can, whether it be content creators. Yes, there's going to be some cases we're talking taxes and distribution, not too much, so I'm not going to bore people. And continue to talk about Kickstarters, cool Kickstarters that are coming out. If there's any ideas that people have of things they want us to cover, shoot us a note. If you are a publisher, shoot us a note and you're interested in coming on our podcast, we'd love to talk to you. Let's see if we can line up a date. Go to theboardgamebinge.com. There's a contact form there. Send us your thoughts, and we read every single one of them, and we'll see what we can line up. I just want to wish everybody all the best. I hope you have an awesome day, and we'll see you on Thursday when we're talking about, was it Isle of Cats 2? Isle of Cats 2, the expansion. I love it. All right, you take care. Cheers.
Yeah.
This has been an episode of the Board Game Binge podcast, hosted by James Staley, produced by James Staley and Mike Bruner, with original music by Nick Smith. If you would like to watch these interviews live, simply join the Facebook group Board Game Binge, and you'll get access to live interviews, giveaways, and interesting board game content from across the industry. I can't wait for you to join us. See you next time.